Welcome to the story of Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop. This is Chapter 5, Reality's Brick. It is Set Aside Sunday, so let's see what Mom and Millie are going to find at the farmer's market. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki, and thanks for letting me read this to you. Hopefully, I adequately convey my deep appreciation of our community farmers markets. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com. And you can follow this podcast and other stories on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Now, I'll be up front. Millie's going to have a panic attack in this episode. Something that's gone through for me in the past. And some of the most important thing I need to remember is you can get out the other side of it. So no matter how upset Millie gets, we'll get through this together. Chapter 5, Reality's Brick. The apartment quietly watched a cold and cloudy Saturday slowly tick by. Homework was finished, dinner was consumed, air was breathed. Punishments were not extended, neither were greetings. The first words said came on Sunday morning. "Millie," Mom called through the door. "What?" She pretended to be just waking up. She shook a little more volume into her hair before opening the door and resting on the frame with half-closed eyes. "Church starts in 30 minutes. Let's go." "Go what?" "It's Set Aside Sunday." "We're really gonna do this?" "It's Set Aside Sunday." Like it meant something to repeat. "You and me have things to do together. Church, market, mall. We can grab some lunch. What other questions do you have?" "We're going to act like there's anything normal about this. We're going to brunch and Dad's out drinking on the third moon of Endor." "Your father is not involved with any fuzzy teddy bear insurrection of any kind. He has other things he does, and I assure you they are all firmly on Earth. Get dressed for church." Stoney called down the hall twice more for Millie to pick it up faster. Millie was busy pulling out two shoes that went pretty well with her shirt, but looked ridiculous with her pants. This was a non-uniform required day. They were perfect. Mom did the size up, a scan and judgment of Millie's clothes, hair, cleanliness, and attitude, but decided against that discussion. Stoney had her purse and jacket on and started running down their itinerary. "After church, we should go to the mall to get some shoes. That'll be after breakfast at the farmer's market under the highway. It's finishing up soon." "Isn't it too cold to grow things?" "No, there's plenty of things that are being harvested. Do you want to get a pumpkin? Some kale?" "Not really." It plagued Millie about what horrors Dad would turn those vegetables into. "Isn't it too cold to be outside?" "That's why we stop at the coffee and donut stand first. We don't need to get a lot, but it's nice to go and support the market itself." "Whatever makes you feel good." Millie waved her hand. That was too abrupt. Millie saw her mom's shoulders roll back. They walked to church under another silence. The early service was advertised as contemporary because someone played hymns on an electric guitar. More importantly, Miss Collins sang. She stood with a dozen of her more muted and respectful scarves hanging from her arms, and she began to open her lungs to the Lord. "Who climbs to paradise? Who stands apart? Those with clean hands and those with pure hearts." Miss Collins wasn't singing for opera at the Met. She sang for something deeper inside herself. It was singing without any of the official singing things she made Millie do. No hands, no chest, no curtsy. It was all just Miss Collins and her voice. She even smiled a genuine smile at the guitarist, coaxing him on after a missed beat. There was no accosting him and demanding he repeat it 3 more times. Just joy at playing the song. and Millie had a joy watching. Lift up your heads, lift up your gates, lift up your ancient doors. Let the King enter and see the glory that is the Lord's. It was a high point in a Knoll service. The sanctuary was mostly filled with old people who would stay for the second service too. Mom read and shook hands and stood at the right times like it was her job. This was another layer of unemployed for Dad. All Millie waited for was the closing song from Miss Collins. She survived the hour of parts between Miss Collins' songs before they were on their way to get some food. The farmer's market was not full, but it was busy. During the week, this was a parking lot wedged under a highway that was assigned for city government workers. But on Sundays in the summer, the farmers from the countryside took over and backed their trucks in. They set up tables to sell whatever was in season. This last weekend before Halloween, the pickings were lots of orange and dark green things. Traffic still rumbled overhead. She looked at the underside of the highway that was the roof of the market. Mom went table to table. She had some things to buy and plenty more things to look for. Between the farmers were folks selling dyed fabrics and leather wallets and paintings of the city. The walk was part of the process. The wheels bouncing on the highway overhead could be rainwater moving down a calming stream. She sensed Mom's leisure extend. Millie heard the rolling wheels differently. They were a thrum, heartbeat of a very large machine. They were all standing inside. Millie's emotions tightened. She looked out the sides to see daylight. They were buildings and the bright sky. The highway and the other buildings reflected off their windows. She thought about looking through each of the shining doors and windows that would reveal a distant gleaming city inside the buildings. The ground fell away and Millie was in space. Her mind started running without her body following. The universe became very twisted and inside out. Her space inside her head was peculiar and fuzzy. Reality became insecure and unhinged from the ground below her feet. Outside was inside, and inside was the galaxy and beyond. The muscles of her ankles throbbed with the traffic above, and her heartbeat tingled in her fingertips. Mom was chatting with the coffee guy as he ran 2 pounds of dark beans through the grinder and into a paper bag. She didn't see the puzzled glaze that filled Millie's eyes. Millie turned around and looked at the box trucks backed up behind each vendor's table, lined in rows. Some were open, and the farmers were moving their stock to the back lip, where another person took the cases to the table set up to sell. Others were closed tight. Millie turned around again. More trucks. Her mind opened each of the back gates to a different place, with fantastic moonscapes or floating worlds. The ground beneath her feet lifted and warped like oversized donuts on the pastry counter next to the coffee. She turned, more trucks, more open gates to otherwhere. The hard gulp Millie forced down her own throat brought things together for a minute. Her tired mixed itself through all the lines of her arms and legs, but her heart was still beating fast. And now her mind was showing her things she wasn't ready to be afraid of. Don't lose it, she said to herself. Don't start freaking out about this or you'll never getting back to your books or the shop. She saw herself screaming down the market midway and Mom running to catch up. She saw the Mom and Dad line up with stern faces and folded hands across the kitchen table. She heard them dictating that the universe was just too scary a place for a little girl, and she was not allowed out in it. No more shop, no more books, no more explanation, never. Explanation. That's all she was asking. They were afraid of something. Tell me, tell me, Millie screamed in her head. Tell me that there is not some heartless awful looking to kill them all. Or was it bigger than that? Was it a nameless object inhabiting the vast void of space, waiting to destroy everything with little regard to worth, goodness, or reason? Was it a dark terror whose sticky fingers left not just a mark, but a drawing thread between its target and the tire, black, soulless fear waiting beyond the edge of knowledge? How something was this something? What are you afraid of? Tell me. The moment of skipped heartbeat subsided. It was replaced with fear, so completely encompassing and unknowable as being stuffed upside down in the foot of a sleeping bag and whipped with eels. Millie careened around, looking for something to grab a hold. She found a nice railing and missed it before watching the small bricks from the facades of nearby buildings pop out and crash through reality. The day-to-day running of the shop was left to the machine. The machine went by many names. On the planet Lupraz, those who knew about it called it Glastos, the traditional name for a long hallway of many doors. Friends on the Apollyon worlds called it Ski, the spider that sat on the web of the universe. There is no magic to the machine, although it can appear whimsical at times. It is a machine of many parts that don't always work together or agree. At its core, there is the persistence engine. Jules gave it that name in anger due to its ability to remember everything. He had lost a bet, a big one, to Stony. She had a different name for it. Stony had spent 6 months locked in the shop, rebuilding it for the second time. She simply called it Ball. We're not going to talk about what that means. In his mind, Grandpa called the machine that ran the shop Crystal. Where Grandpa grew up and lived, Crystal was not the name for a girl or a shape for rocks. Where he came from, Crystal was the crosstown bus. He had taken it every day between his house and his bookshop. From when he opened the shop, through marriages, pregnancies, deaths, births, adoptions, and again deaths, he took the Crystal bus. There were days that Crystal, the bus, was slow, but sulfur was pouring from the sky. There were days that seats were not available, but there was a tri-dimensional egg ball tournament in town. When you ride the same route every day, the days vary more than the route. The route was dependable, regular, and made absolute sense. It was the perfect machine. With few exceptions, Grandpa saw Crystal, the shop, as dependable, regular, and making perfect sense like Crystal, the bus. Since Stony's second rebuild, it had been 13 Earth years, give or take, since the last glitch. That is pretty sincere dependability, and twice as long as between tridimensional egg ball tournaments. Grandpa left the day-to-day running of the shop to Crystal until Crystal was completely unresponsive. It was a sudden stoppage, leaving the shop completely silent. All the little creaks and whispers that Crystal made as it ran the shop just ceased. Grandpa wondered if he had gone deaf until the newspaper crinkled as he folded it back to the table. The silence left a hole in Grandpa, an absence like his right leg had been taken when he was trying to climb up a ladder. It knocked him over symbolically, which was perfectly effective, until a force knocked him over literally. The sound of pounding against the front of the building rattled across the inside of the shop. There was no one beating on the door. Whatever made the sound warped the entire front of the building that had no front. It shook and rippled like a face at the force of a boxing glove. The pounding waved through the pages of the books and echoed all the way to the back of the shop. The ripple refocused from the walls of the shop onto the door. The door opened, and Grandpa saw a whole street of people walk out of the shop. They had never walked in. He didn't know where they were from or where they were going. Each person crackled to life in front of the counter, a parade moving out the door, phantoms moving along a crowded sidewalk. The whole body of bodies started faint and got darker and more resolved. When they passed the threshold of the shop, going out to whatever they would find, each person was solid and real. A dozen, 100, 1,000 people moved between non-existence and the city sidewalk before Grandpa. The door slammed shut. Then it happened again. Concussive, pounding, parade of ghosts, slammed door. Then it happened a third time, and a fourth for good measure. The pounding and parade stopped, but only long enough for the door to click shut firmly for another concussively silent moment, which made the next click of the opening door even louder. The world tilted left and right, then completely backward before Millie's knees buckled and the back of her head aimed to hit the tarmac. Stony knew Millie was falling before she felt the rumbling quake through the asphalt. She had just enough time between thanking the man for the bag of ground dark roast and the impact of Millie's head on the parking lot to drop the bag of coffee and get her hands in to soften the collision. Then there was the boom. Stony looked to the sound to see spiderwebs shooting up glass windows and chunks dropping from the front of a building. It was coming outward, the force beating from behind the facade of the building. She held her daughter's head and listened for other earthquake sounds, the rattle, the shifting. There were none. Millie passed out hard and ugly enough to growl a long, slobbering blah and call attention from the 100 nearby pedestrians. Even with the world collapsing around their ears, many of them focused on the fainting teenager. Mom's catch was champion, and some uttered about the psychicness of a mother's intuition. The coffee vendor offered bottled water, which was thankfully accepted. Stony waited a minute for Millie's breathing to become regular, and herself to start breathing again. From the side of the boom, shoppers suddenly flooded into the market. They were ignorant to any boom or sound or the fact that they were 9-foot-tall reptiles pushing through a group of 5-foot-tall mammals. For their sake, the mammals didn't notice either. The foggy slush of her brain was very difficult for Millie to wade through. 2 days passed in an instant, while an instant took a week. She was flummoxed. She was twisted. She was living in the dark. She decided to open her eyes. All she saw were gray beams and corrugated steel that formed the underside of the highway overhead. The thrum returned, but didn't match beat with her toes. Her mouth tasted like licking a marker, and her teeth were fuzzy. Mom's voice puckered the wall around her brain a few times before opening itself a hole and crawling in. Millie, Millie, drink some water. The soap-top cap of a sport bottle of water passed Millie's lips and offered a few drops of fluid. Mom hadn't squeezed and Millie hadn't choked, just enough to wake up. Just to wake up to another boom. The sound came from the side where the throng of lizards was tapering off. Millie heard that one in her teeth. Stony heard it in her memory. This is the shop, Stony knew, coming sideways. It hadn't done this in how long? And why? Why was it coming for them? Or just Millie? It does not obey the rules with her, does it? Millie opened her eyes and breathed a cool gasp. A heartbeat at normal rhythm shot a cold shiver between Millie's shoulders and erupting from the top of her head. Her left side bottom and her flat back were still on the ground, but her head was in Mom's hand. She felt bone rigid, but knew she was limp and folded over. Folding, just like the universe. Millie sat bolt upright as more shoppers flooded the market. Insectoids, hard shells and extra limbs with thick dark hairs. The multi-part mouths scratched and rattled conversations about sticking to their budget and their diet or enjoying a good morning in the open-air market. Again, the insectoids didn't notice, and the lizards didn't notice, and the mammals didn't notice. It was just a big market day on the weekend before Halloween. But they noticed the fainted teenager. Of course, they noticed the fainted teenager. They always notice the fainted teenager. Bystanders took a step back and whispered words like seizure and amphetamines. Mom stared each in the eyes and thanked them for their concern. Big eyes, little eyes, segmented eyes. Each one had their mind put to rest and suddenly thought more about the need for a hearty, healthy breakfast and how one should skip eating sugar after midnight. Millie, how do you feel? Mom asked, eye to eye with Millie. Like shit. That's the wrong word, honey. Do you feel foggy or fuzzy or nauseous? Fuzzy. Okay. Is it in your eyes, your ears, or your brain? Brain, dead center, and ouch. Drink some water, and we'll see how things sort themselves out. Mom helped Millie over to a bench, excused herself back to the pastry cart, and came back with an oversized muffin. They sat for a second. Millie let the muffin rest in her lap, nibbling the edges. Her hands were crossed, the water in one, and the other slowly rubbing the charms on her wrist, trying to feel something to latch onto in this insane experience. Stoney's mind was at work while she smiled and waited for her daughter to calm. The shop was fighting against itself, its protocol to attach right here. They were so close to the other door, their door, and it was knocking real things out of the way, and it wasn't done yet. They were in for a couple more pops before the shop tethered to this place. All the noise and beating she knew could happen, but where had these others come from? Mom? Yes, dear. Stoney put away all the other concentrations, all the other distractions. She focused on Millie. It's not all people in the market today. Stoney smiled. They are all people, dear. Some just don't realize how far from home they are. How did they get here? Millie looked over the bugs and the lizards mixing with humans and moving through their normal market stuff. They were haggling and picking up fruit and dropping grocery bags and shushing running children, just like they had walked across the block, not across the galaxy. I don't know, but the shop has to tether before we can do anything about it. The shop is doing this. Maybe. But, Stoney cut her off, but we can't do anything to correct it before the shop tethers. And that's what it's trying to do right now. As she said it, the front of the building rippled again. It took a half second before the boom, and the wave blew across them. The walls cracked and the windows splintered. Millie closed her eyes and felt the wind and road grit move across her. This time it was humans that came out. A flood of jade robes and gold chains covering all the men and women with their heads shaved in concentric rings of fuzz and bald. The topmost tuft of hair was higher and more brightly colored for the folks in the center of the group. And what do I get to call these? They're people, dear. They are all people. Stoney took a quick survey of the new crowd. But these you can specifically call the first standard cult of Maxis the Obnoxious, and they live up to the name. There was no empty silence this time. There was no waiting for the next pounding explosion. The pointing and meandering cracks running in the walls started erasing. The little ends first, but as those ends disappeared, the wide breaks were already narrower. Then those disappeared, pulling together the wider ones below. It was as someone drained the gap itself from a small spout at the bottom of the wall. And the bricks just flowed back into the vacated spaces. The deltas of shattering across glass windows went from mirrored opaque to clear, as the rivers that once crossed them simply dried up. The bricks and shards on the ground dissipated as if they melted like an ice cube on a hot day. A moment of work and an instant of pause before the very familiar "Open" sign flipped against the window. The pounding had stopped. The shop had tethered. Stoney felt relief. One unknown was now known. The little bit of physical cleanup was done. Now to get into the shop and start tackling the next problem. Stoney picked up Millie's arm and started walking toward the new face of the shop. "Time to go," she said gently. Millie saw the world move past her. All the people who hadn't noticed a bit. Didn't they even feel that explosion? No, they weren't paying attention. They didn't know they needed to. The swirling tingle started again behind Millie's eyes. This is craziness. The whole place was about to fall over. Take a breath, Millie. We are not in danger. Now we just have to figure out. Millie threw down her elbow, breaking her mother's grip. She stopped dead and yelled, "But you said we are always in danger. You said the shop was a danger factory. A building falling over is not danger? What is?" "This is something different." Stoney put her fingers up, trying to lower the girl's tone. Millie hated the gesture, like her mother was controlling a puppet and could make her flex with a wave of her fingers. She missed Stoney say, "The first time I saw that happen, I had no idea what was going on. It is scary." But Millie did hear the part, "Now that the shop is here, we can get you safe and start figuring this out." "So you just want to lock me in a cage while you figure it out? Are you the Colonel working together?" "Look, Millie, that's..." Mom's fingers flexed again. "Or better, don't tell me. Just lie to me for another dozen years." Stoney took a full breath to catch the one that just punched out of her. She put her fingers into fists. They went to her side as she stood straight. "That was inappropriately loud in a very inappropriate place." "I agree." Millie untangled from her mother to stomp over to the new door of the shop in this strange corner away from her neighborhood. She opened it and went in. Stoney watched the open sign disappear. This world was suddenly very alien to her. This was Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop, Chapter 5, Reality's Brick. In the next episode, the shop's erratic behavior continues and it gives Millie a choice to make. Thank you for listening. You can find more about Millie at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading some more for you soon.